Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
I got to say, sitting in Brad's spot, I really thought he'd have a booster seat over here.
I thought he did as well.
So maybe I'm too hard on him. I could have sworn to be able to see over his phone and to see your face, he'd need like a padded cushion or something under it. But
you do look a lot taller than Brad does in that spot.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I had to pay Evan quite a bit to say that. Folks, welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. It's just Evan and I today. No Brad. In the third chair, we have our, as usual, we'll swap it out eventually, but we have our Mark Stahl 1000 game shirt, which is
still looks good.
Good stand-in, better than any of us. Brad dodged this episode, which I think is funny because we have to immediately recognize that for record time this season, I think in record time, actually after last episode, we were immediately wrong about something that we talked about in a focused way with Jonatan Berggren being called up.
I think that might be the first one this year.
Yeah.
You know, we always joke like, the trade's going to happen as soon as we have to go on vacation or Brad's stuck on the highway somewhere.
Yeah.
I think this is the first one this year where I think you couldn't have hit publish and then that news came out any sooner.
It was so funny. And I remember looking at my phone, seeing the notification come through, and I was like first excited because Berggren was being called up. And then I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I was like, you know what? We opened our stupid mouths and put it out into the world.
Yeah.
It ended up being the Soderblom injury changed things, and he wasn't going to be called up if not for that. But I was like, I sent it in the chat actually, and I had some choice words about it in a joking way. I was like, yeah, that's our first one this year.
We're very on brand, at least.
Oh yeah. So the next time you want a player to be called up, you want a big trade to happen, let us know. And the seal is broken now. So now when we talk about something, we're challenging the hockey gods. Really, we're just challenging Steve Yzerman, and he decides how stupid we look that day.
Yeah, pretty much.
Silly game to play, but we do it anyways. All right, folks, welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk to you about all things Red Wings hockey, which, sometimes good, sometimes not. The world of the NHL and hockey beyond. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
And I'm Evan.
Brad, not here today. He is stranded on a desert island. Evan and I had the chance to save him, and we chose not to.
How am I going to know what the Buffalo Bills did today?
Oh, God.
I don't know. How am I supposed to know? I'm now out of sync with their season.
I thought it was bad enough with Brad, but then finding out that Derek Lalonde is also a big Bills fan, which, hey, I have no problem with the Bills, but I'm like, Brad is not going to shut up about this.
That's not good. Great piece of information. Always glad to hear more about players and coaches' personal lives and have some personality, but that one was not ideal for us.
I hate when it makes Brad happy.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
He perks up, which is a remarkable thing because you don't think he could be any peppier.
It's easy for me because all hockey players apparently love to golf, so I don't even need it. Doesn't even need to be brought up.
It's a given.
Yeah.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be covering the two games that the Red Wings played, which were tough to watch at different points for different reasons, but we'll be covering them nonetheless. We'll be talking about what the Red Wings have to look forward to in their Western road trip or West Coast road trip coming forward. We'll talk about how Jonatan Berggren looked and what Tyler Bertuzzi and maybe even Jake Walman might be able to do for this team. And then we'll cut to an interview that we recorded with good friend of the show, Prashanth Iyer, to the topics might seem a little bit different now because we recorded before or after the Rangers game, before the Kings game, but we'll be talking about where the Red Wings stand this season, what the underlying numbers say about them, and a lot of other really interesting stuff. We'll come back. We have some NHL news, and then we'll jump into overtime. Before that, folks, Thursday, December 1st is something that we're very, very excited for. Hot Stove Stories with Mickey and Ken. It is at Motor City Casino in Detroit. It is a breakfast event, so starts at 8 a.m. Breakfast is served, and more importantly, you are going to be served with a ton of fantastic stories, banter, live Q&A with the audience, which would be you. It features not only Mickey Redmond and Ken Daniels, but also special guests Chris Draper and Chris Osgood, as well as refereeing legend Dan O'Halloran and current refereeing legend Wes McCauley. Unfortunately for you, I'll be there playing moderator, but those guys are really gonna bring the good stuff in terms of story, and Mick's gonna be going at the refs, which is always a good time. So. Of course, everything in that benefits the Jamie Daniels Foundation. So it's a wonderful cause. You get served breakfast. You get a chance to meet and talk to these NHL legends, these refereeing legends, and you help promote the fight against substance use disorders. So go to jamiedanielsfoundation.org to get your tickets. I really hope to see that room full when we're there. I hope to see as many of you as possible. And of course, there's going to be a live auction with some incredible merch, and very, very shortly, the silent auction ahead of the event will be going up as well. So stay tuned to jamiedanielsfoundation.org for that too. Okay, the Red Wings, since last episode, have had a time.
They've had two good periods.
Yeah, I'll give them a cumulative 2 good periods. No, even more than that, actually. Because
wow, look at you, the optimist.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm in Brad's chair. Let's talk about the New York Rangers game first. And it started out like there was a lot of excitement in that game because Jonatan Berggren slotted into the lineup. He was playing on Joe Veleno's wing. Harks back to their chemistry from the Grand Rapids Griffins days. Which, by the way, thank you, Grand Rapids, for your noble sacrifices of some of your best players to the Red Wings. The game didn't start out too hot. Obviously, 15 minutes in, Mika Zibanejad scored to give New York the lead, but it wasn't too far after where Joe Veleno had a great play moving up the ice. He utilized his speed, had that give and go with Berggren. So Berggren got his first NHL point after Veleno had a fantastic finish. Mata also got the assist on that. So it didn't take long for Berggren to get his first point. And I honestly think he looked good for both games that he played.
Yeah, I think, even at a high level assessment, like he looked very comfortable out there, which is tough to do, especially given that you're coming against the Rangers and then subsequently the LA Kings as well. So the fact that he didn't look like he was in over his head was a very good sign.
They started him out on the, quote unquote, fourth line next to Veleno. Obviously, once you get into the bottom 6, it just changes, depends on ice time. But I did like that they did that. I like that they stuck him with Veleno. That's a familiar face, and you're not sticking the guy, even though the Red Wings have a talent deficiency right now in their top 6, and they need some kind of playmaker. For the first game, at least, they gave him a little bit more of a sheltered ease-in role, which is the easiest thing to do for a coach. But I could have seen a coach going in the direction of, okay, no, we need a spark in this top 6 now. Let's put him in there, and they gave the Berggren the chance to get his legs.
Yeah, and he didn't really last there all that long.
No.
He was quickly graduated through the lineup. And I think he had some power play time last night, too. So he's certainly earned the ice time that he's been given. I don't know what the ice time ended up in the Ranger game or the LA game, but I know he was well over 15 minutes, at least in the LA game. So that's a big sign of confidence from Lalonde into Berggren. So far, the start has been really good for him.
Yeah, and we'll talk about where he ended up on the lineup when we covered the LA game. And yeah, he was about 14 and a half to 15 and a half minutes across the 2 games. So yeah, that's quite a bit of ice time.
Pretty good.
The Red Wings opened up the second period by taking the lead, and it was Larkin and Raymond, 2 of the Red Wings' best players all year. Larkin with a great pass off the boards, found Raymond with an unreal rip. And what I really liked about the coverage on that is Mick immediately on the broadcast talked about why Raymond was able to do that. So why did he struggle towards the end of the last year and even at the start of the season for a few games? He was being collapsed on. He wasn't able to find space the same way he used to. They were just glued to him, and opposing teams really cracked down on shutting him down because he's such a dangerous weapon, especially his shot's a little sneaky. Yeah. And he's been able to find that space again. He's focused more on putting himself in opportune situations where he has a half step or a half second to think and execute. And because he has such high hockey IQ and a fantastic shot and great playmaking ability, that's why we've seen the production from him. So that was on display. Like Larkin, fantastic job pulling the puck off the wall and a great little backhand pass to him and great rip by Raymond. And yeah, there was those 2 keep rolling.
Yeah, he's getting his shot off just a hair quicker than he was earlier in the season. And I think, in the NHL, that amount of time is a world of difference. So, yeah, he's looked good, and those 2 keep rolling along.
Yeah, the Rangers tied it before the end of the second on a power play. And then beyond that...
then the game ended. That was it.
It was so bizarre. It was so bizarre, right? Like, the third period started up, and it's not like the Red Wings were being absolutely caved, but funny story. I was actually on the phone with my dad. my dad, we talk hockey. We grew up watching hockey with him. Sometimes we get on the horn, and he actually called because he heard Ken mention us on the broadcast talking about the hot stove event, and we were talking about the game, and it's still 2-2. And my dad doesn't bet a lot, but sometimes he likes to, and he was like, damn, Adam Fox just scored, and I bet on this game being 6 goals or under. Before I even got off the phone with him, it was, I think, 5-2. Like, Adam Fox scored that goal, and was it the world's best goal? No, I think it was a little soft, but it's like the Red Wings just gave up.
They scored 4 goals in just under 3 minutes.
The final score of the game won't be a surprise to anyone. It was 8-2 New York, and they went into the third, in the first 5 minutes of the third, tied 2-2. It was... Brad uses this phrase so often.
Oh, God.
You know what I'm about to say.
Maybe.
It was a parody of itself in terms of the Red Wings' third period collapses, because they still have that problem. We've talked about it for a few episodes now and for the last, decade. But this was like...
And this... It usually feels just like, a trickle, it's a slow burn to these leads. And this season, it's felt like it just happens in 3 minutes and you blink and you're like, what the hell just happened?
6 unanswered goals in the third. And, I don't think Husso did a great job with them. I think the defense did an even worse job. I think Seider, the focus is always going to be on Seider with these, but it's not like he's been good and it's just like the team's dragging him down. Like, no, during these collapses, I think that was Seider and the rest of the defense's worst period all year. That's not a hot take. 6 goals against unanswered, but the defense imploded. I don't care if that's Dominic Hasek and Ned. No one saving that game for the Red Wings.
Patrick Waugh is walking up to the first row of the stands telling the GM or president he's never playing for the team again.
My goodness. And it's like, what happened? I was doing my recap at the end of the game, and I was like, okay, the first 40 were fine. And then it's like a different team walked out in the third period, and you're at home.
You get the matchups you want.
I don't know. I understand, and we have to take our own, not medicine or advice here by saying, yes, these games are still going to happen. And Derek Lalonde had some very prudent or poignant comments that he said a few times here, which is this is why this team has to execute to the nth degree and get it 100% right, because we are not matched up against these teams. The Red Wings on paper aren't as good as the Rangers. They're not as good as the Kings. They're not as good as a lot of teams. But, and I agree with that. I think that is, I love that honesty from Lalonde, but I don't think the Red Wings are 6 unanswered goals, 8-2 worse. There needs to be a kind of mental check, and it has to start with the defense on how this team plays the game.
Yeah, if you're less talented than your opponent, you either need to outwork them or be out prepare that team. And if you're not prepared to come into another period against a ultra talented team like the Rangers, you're going to pay the price for it. And that was on full display the other night. So I don't know really what you say about it. It's tough to watch. I'm sure it's even worse to play in just watching, being almost helpless to the onslaught. But yeah, there needs to be more commitment and more readiness to start games and to start periods.
Regardless, I think the Red Wings understood that one in terms of how it can't get away from them like that. They traveled to LA and they had what it is for everyone in Detroit in this time zone. On this coast of the continent, a late night game, a 10:30 game. I know some folks from across North America and beyond like the West Coast trips for different reasons, so a little treat for them. But yeah, 10:30 game, and it immediately felt like a slog because it was 10:30 at night when they started, and I don't think the Red Wings off the hop were that good. Really, really for the first 40 minutes. First of all, another bad game from Ned. Those goals were.
I mean, it was they scored in the first. LA scored in the first 10 seconds.
9 seconds in, 9 seconds in.
You can basically just clip that part I said about being prepared to start periods and games, and just insert that there as well, because when you're on the road, you absolutely cannot get behind like that immediately, and especially against a team like LA who can shut it down when they need to.
Yeah, it was. They're a good team. Now, this was a funny game because it was a little bit of an inverse in terms of the Red Wings that we've seen. So the Red Wings walked into the third period not completely scoreless. They had a goal on the board. Dominic Kubalik was able to score on the power play. Good feed from Hronek, and of course Kubalik's going to bury it because all he does is produce, apparently.
He outpowered Cal Peterson.
Yeah. The Red Wings walked into the third period with a 4-1 deficit, and all I could think was two things. One is they need to have the best third period of the year to win this game, and two, all I could think of was the previous game where they had the worst third period of the year. So,
yes, if you need to have a third period to really come back, the track record of late has not been ideal.
I was so convinced I'd go to bed after that game completely, like with no tone change after the second period. But funny enough, we got an inverted Red Wings. Not really that great through the first 40, and then all of a sudden turned it on with the kind of pressure and generating chances. It's not like they were world beaters and absolutely dominating LA to the point where there's no way they couldn't come back, or there's no way they weren't going to come back. But they were really good. And I thought if they had sustained that level of play through at least most of the game, they wouldn't have walked into the third period 4-1. But Larkin was able to get a power play goal. Great feed from Sundqvist from down low. And then Filip Hronek, a point shot went in.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness, finally.
Cleanly.
Yeah. And we haven't seen that. We don't see much of that anymore. And that was with an extended net pull really early on. I think
it was like 4.5, maybe even 5 minutes left in the game. And
2 goals down. I mean, that's what you have to do.
And Red Wings of old would have given up 2 or 3 goals, and the game would have ended at a much different scoreline than what it did last night.
So, seeing them come back to that 4-3, it ultimately ended 4-3, and it was a little bit of a too little, too late effort, but it is a slight positive. Like, you take the positives, Kubalik and Larkin kept producing. Berggren had another good game, I thought. You can say the same for Raymond, who got on the board, and Perron in terms of an assist, and Perron had a couple assists as well. Like, those are all things you can draw from. The negatives here, though, is I understand they're getting on the road and they just traveled a long way.
Got the old LA flu.
Yeah, no kidding. But they needed to turn that game on before the third period.
Yeah, when you look at just the past few games period by period, like the Red Wings basically played a full game. Well, we're basically non-existent for a full amount of a game.
Yeah.
And you can't have that. The Red Wings, I thought, were extremely sloppy in their execution in the first 2 periods. Passes were all over the place. People were missing assignments everywhere. There were I can't remember who scored. Maybe it was a Grundstrom goal, but it was basically almost a carbon copy of the Mike Hoffman goals the other night. Rasmussen's coming back with back pressure. Him and the defenseman don't communicate who's got who, and Mike Hoffman or Carl Grundstrom are wide open, and you just cannot be doing that at the NHL level. So it was just preparedness once again was not there, but the team really started to figure that out, and Dylan Larkin made it his life's mission to bring that team back into the game last night.
Could they have been helped if that was a game with Husso in net where he was, lights out? He might have held them in it a little bit closer to the third period, but the story goes is that the team needs to be better to the point where they can't have to rely on the goalie. The spoiler here is I don't think much is going to change in that regard because that's a talent issue. I'm not trying to do like a gamer meme here, but it's a skill issue, honestly.
Yeah, the Red Wings goalies have to be basically the best players every single night to give this team a chance to win.
Yeah.
Especially against teams that have far more depth and skill than the Red Wings do.
Well, let's talk about some offensive talent. Jonatan Berggren, again, played those 2 games. Actually, he almost he missed the call from Derek Lalonde telling him he was called up and playing. He thought it was a spam call.
This is a failure on the telecommunications regulatory bodies, because if I don't recognize the number in my phone, I'm not picking it up either. So I totally sympathize with him.
I go through waves of sometimes I just don't pick it up because I'm like, whatever, they can leave a voicemail. And then sometimes they've gotten really good at spoofing to like area codes around you.
Yes.
Or area codes that you converse with them a lot.
Yep.
And especially near the event, I was getting a lot from Detroit. And I was like, great, this is something to do with the event, from the team, someone else. And it was all just spam calls. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I understand, Jonatan.
Yeah, I totally don't blame him, because if I'm not almost 90% sure I know what this call's about, I'm not picking it up. And even if I do, I still probably am not picking it up. So good thing he resolved that issue.
Well, he looked good. And I understand that Bertuzzi coming back might change things and Soderblom coming back might change things. But quite honestly, based on how Berggren looked, I'm of the mind of, Soderblom could possibly benefit. Like, I don't think he was playing lights out, to say the least, especially after his really hot start. And I've said that on this podcast. He might benefit from some time in Grand Rapids. It's easy to send him down. I understand that they might want to keep him in the NHL, because if it's just like a legs thing, like getting your legs and your lungs to the NHL pace and that stamina, then, give him some time to adjust. But if Berggren's coming in hot, and they've said before they want to give him an extended look if they're giving him a look, I kind of vote that they find a way to keep him on, whether that's Soderblom or whether that's scratching a different forward. I know Zarnik's up, whatever it might be. I like the idea of Berggren having his time to really display what he's doing, because it's the first 2 games, it's looked good.
And the schedule's quite conducive right now to give him a good look, because they've got San Jose and Anaheim coming up.
Yeah,
and
they have
the
Anaheim on Tuesday.
Sorry, the Blue Jackets?
Yeah, Anaheim Tuesday, San Jose Thursday. Those are both late night games. And then the Blue Jackets on Saturday at 7 Eastern.
So if there's any teams to really get a good look at what this guy's got, this is the time. And, the Red Wings started out the season with a really pretty relaxed schedule as well. And that helped Soderblom get on the board and get his legs under him. But, like, it's such a small sample size for both of them. Like, it's hard coming into the NHL, especially straight from Sweden, right? Like, he hasn't played any North American hockey. Like,
before the season.
Yeah, before the season. Like, the NHL is an absolute grind. So the fact that Soderblom's been less productive than he was at the start is really no surprise.
No.
But yeah, I think Berggren should get an extended look at this time, see what he's got. His schedule, is conducive for him to find his legs, and he's played in the AHL before, and like he knows really, what the schedule and what that grind is like. So he could take this opportunity and never look back. And if Soderblom's got to go down for some time in Grand Rapids, if they feel that's the best for his development path, then I don't see any problem in that at all.
There's a lot of moves Lalonde can make. It's not just Soderblom. Injuries are going to come
Lots
and go.
of guys.
Yeah. Speaking of injuries, Tyler Bertuzzi could be back as soon as Tuesday. So our next episode might be talking about a Tyler Bertuzzi game. It's not guaranteed, but if all things go well, he'll play Tuesday night against the Ducks, 10 Eastern. If not, I would imagine we'd see him by the Thursday game against the Sharks. But that's
easy. Those are good games to work yourself back into the lineup.
Yeah. It's just a good sign that really he's traveling with the team too.
Yeah.
Like, he's ready, essentially almost there. And of course you want to take your time. You don't want to rush him in too early and re-aggravate, because they really need that guy playing games. And the ugly part of this is they need him playing games for 2 reasons.
The showcase.
Yeah, like there's no contract yet. So if he's not signed, you either need to know who he is for the sake of the contract negotiations, and or if you know he's not going to sign because one of a million reasons, you're too far apart on term, you're too far apart on money, whatever it might be.
Just replay every episode for the past 5 months.
Yeah. Then you need him having, again, you're right, Evan. He needs to be showcased to other teams because they're going to want to see that he's healthy and effective.
Everybody needs more information and for their own reasoning.
Personally, I just want to see this team
not lose.
Yeah. So this is another showcase in I want to smack everybody who says, oh, you guys just love when the Red Wings lose, so you have something to whine about. It's like, you have no idea how much more happy people are and engaged people are when this team wins. I want to print the Berggren goal. I want to print it into a newspaper-sized piece of paper, roll it up, and just swat the next person who says you guys just love to whine. Because it's just so much better when this team has something to cheer for and the fans are excited about something. And you know what? I understand opposing teams' fans are always like, oh, Red Wings fans are spoiled. Red Wings fans have gone through a shitty decade here. Like a shitty decade.
Yep.
They've been patient through it, and it's a very smart fan base. But at some point you can't keep having these stinkers. So yeah, I want Tyler Bertuzzi back. So this team is tougher to play against, produces more, and has a better chance to win games.
Yes, because it does get tiring.
Oh God,
watching loss after loss pile up. Last season was probably maybe last season, maybe the season before were definitely the two toughest seasons.
Season before last for me.
Yeah, that was like the pain was never ending.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we've got glimpses of a team on the up, and we want to see more of that. So I think now there's a little bit of sprinkling of expectation in there. So when we whine, it's coming from a place of we expect more from this team, unlike the past years where we just wanted it to end, and we're starting the prospect profiles probably now.
All right, well, let's cut to an interview here with Prashanth Iyer, a really good friend of the show and someone who brings a lot of great analysis, especially in the world of analytics and brutal honesty. So you won't be new to Prashanth, and if you are, well, I hope you enjoy this interview. Stay tuned. Prashanth, I'm laughing because I'm just now realizing that you set your name on our call to Ryan's Spilled Coffee.
Yeah. Well, whenever we have those sorts of delays, we have to make sure we make fun of them. And Ryan spilled a whole bunch of coffee right by expensive equipment, so that was going to be my name.
Relaxing Saturday afternoon, just saunter up to the studio, set up for my call with Prashanth, and I just decided to spill almost an entire coffee. Yeah, and in the middle of like sopping up coffee, I pulled out my phone to text you. Sorry, delay, spilled a whole coffee in studio. Anyhow, I'm glad I have my friends to keep me honest.
Oh yeah, immediately logged out and then logged back in with that name. So,
folks, this is Prashanth Iyer, a good friend of ours and of the Winged Wheel podcast, returning to the show. Prashanth, how have you been, man?
Been busy, been flying all over, but I'm finally back at home for a couple of weeks and actually get to look at how this Red Wings team is doing.
Yeah, that's good. It's when we planned this interview, we thought how this Red Wings team is doing would be a lot more of a playoff-centric conversation in terms of how crazy is it. And we'll still have that conversation, but that third period the other day was pretty much a big, it was like the universe grabbing a rolled-up newspaper and whacking us in the nose with it and saying no.
It's important to get those sobering reminders for this team so that we don't get too high on our high horses here this early in the season.
So the Red Wings right now stand in an interesting spot, and I don't think it is too crazy. If you had told us before the season that the Red Wings through 14 games would be 7-4-3, I think a lot of people would be pleasantly surprised. But I don't think it would have been insane considering, the additions that Steve Yzerman made to this team in the offseason and considering the schedule that the Red Wings have had to kick off the year. But why don't we get your take? What do you make of this team overall, where they're at, how they're playing, and how have those 17 points kind of come around for them?
Yeah, so I think anybody who has spent more than one day following me on Twitter knows that I will be brutally honest about this hockey team, whether that is to your liking or not. And so let's be brutally honest about where the Red Wings are. This is not a good team at 5-on-5. In fact, at 5-on-5, if you look at their expected goals for percentage, which is a measure of kind of the quality of shots they're generating versus the quality they're giving up, they're actually worse than last year at 5-on-5 right now. They're actually in line with where they were in 1920, that historically awful season. So they're not playing particularly well at 5-on-5, and that's okay because they've got a lot of injuries. They've got a lot of people out of the lineup. It's been a little bit of a revolving door. We can give them a little bit of a pass there. The reason that they're picking up points is they've had a timely special teams and timely goaltending. Billy Husso has been out of his mind. He's been arguably the best addition this offseason, next to maybe David Perron and Dominic Kubalik. But Husso's been absolutely tremendous up until the most recent shellacking against the Rangers, where the Wings really left him out to dry. And then the other kind of big thing that's really helped the Wings pick up points is their power play has been much more dangerous than it's been probably in the last decade from just the quality of chances that they're generating. And their penalty kill has been opportunistic. And what I mean by that is, yeah, they're still giving up some high-quality chances while shorthanded, but they're capitalizing when they can be aggressive and actually generating shorthanded chances as well. We had the shorthanded penalty shot the other game from Dylan Larkin that he wasn't able to convert. And you've had a couple of shorthanded goals that this team has scored. And so that's what's really allowed them to stay competitive even when the 5-on-5 game's not there. But I think the important, sobering takeaway from this is if that 5-on-5 game doesn't get better soon, there's only so many times you're going to get lucky and be opportunistic with your power play, penalty kill, and goaltending. It's not going to be able to carry you.
So just to state what you just said, I guess maybe in different words, what we're expecting is a regression to the mean here. Over a 82 game sample, we're not going to see the same kind of luck come through. That is going to level out, and the Red Wings will probably, you think, fall lower in the standings unless something changes?
Yeah, I mean, if the Wings continue to play at the level they've been playing at 5-on-5, I would eventually expect the goaltending to regress a little bit and the losses to pile up a little bit more. I think they've been very fortunate so far to pick up, the points where they've been able to, and they've done so by being able to lock down for stretches at 5-on-5 while capitalizing on the power play and the penalty kill. But I can't imagine that if that 5-on-5 play stays the way it is, 80% of the games played at 5-on-5. You're not going to be able to be competitive when you're getting absolutely waxed at 5-on-5. They're 27th in the league right now in 5-on-5 expected goals for percentage. You're not going to be able to sustain the 11th best points percentage when you're playing like that.
The losses of Tyler Bertuzzi and Jacob Vrana, among others, there's a revolving door, like you said, of injuries. But the loss of those two especially, I have found just watching the games, the Red Wings at their best against good teams, where they're not really expected to win, their best expected result seems to be, Husso or maybe Ned even bails them out and they clog up the middle and it's just a really boring game. And the scoring is ultimately dependent on what does Kubalik do that game to really impress us, or does Larkin or Raymond break through? So what is the statistical impact and the play style impact of losing those two of the Red Wings' most productive players?
Well, when you lose those kinds of guys, I think that's what Steve Yzerman was worried about this offseason, and that's why he went out and added so many different guys, is that if you do have those injuries to top six players, you are able to slot in guys that can at least function in that role a little bit better than in years prior. If you had taken Tyler Bertuzzi out of the lineup, last year, and you had taken Lucas Raymond out of the lineup last year, your options would have been very limited as to who could have actually moved up in the lineup. And that's where we saw, a lot of Michael Rasmussen playing second line center, which was a little over his capabilities at the time. And we saw other guys sort of getting those opportunities and just really weren't able to convert as well as they could. Now with all the depth that Yzerman's added, you've got guys like Kubalik who can still contribute, and they can do it a little bit more frequently than you would have had in the past. You can call up guys like Austin Czarnik from Grand Rapids who can score a goal, Matt Luff, who can score a goal. That's the depth that you want to be able to have in place. And so that's why the Wings have been able to maybe stay afloat a little bit longer and survive the injuries a little bit better than they did last year. But at the end of the day, Jacob Vrana and Tyler Bertuzzi are two top six wingers, and Bertuzzi arguably was having one of the best seasons of any winger last year up until he got derailed a little bit. And Jacob Vrana is obviously one of the best shooters in the league, and he has this 40-goal potential every time when he's playing. So taking those two guys out of the lineup, even though you can replace them maybe 70% or 60%, you're still missing a huge chunk of elite talent at the top of your lineup.
These third period collapses, which seem to be a holdover from the previous era, so to speak, of the Red Wings, they're still happening. The most recent one was against the Rangers, where Adam Fox scored and it seemed like the team just gave up. And that was my read on it. Like, the defense wasn't good all game, but it seems like they just gave up because a soft one got past Husso, and then it was when it rains, it pours. Is there anything behind these, 6, 8, 7 goal games against, especially the late game collapses?
I can't necessarily point to anything statistically that demonstrating why these are happening. But if you look at it just from a hockey structure perspective, if you take a team that has lesser talent than their opposition, so in this case, we're going to say it's the Red Wings, and now all of a sudden you put them down a goal in the third period, in order for the Wings to tie the game up, they have to break out of that defensive structure a little bit more. They have to play a little more freely. They have to take more chances. And unfortunately, what I think you saw in that Rangers game is as they opened up their structure a little bit, as they tried to force plays to generate offense to try and catch up, they inadvertently were allowing themselves to be outnumbered on rushes against. And the Rangers sort of bogged down. They clogged up the passes that the Wings wanted to make and were able to very quickly switch from defense to offense and transition. And that's why it was 2-on-1, 3-on-2, breakaways, that type of play that the Wings were giving up. It's because they had opened up their defensive structure to try and force that offense a little bit. And I think that's a consistent, thing that's going to happen for a lot of teams. But when the Wings don't have the talent advantage, when the Wings don't necessarily have the guys in the lineup that can allow them to maybe create something out of nothing or be able to force the play that's going to lead to a good chance, that's when you start to see those snowball effects happening. And really, for a very young team, this is still an extremely young hockey team from a leadership standpoint and from a just overall roster structure standpoint. It can be easy to have them get demoralized, and you can see that happen. But I don't think there's necessarily anything behind it besides there being just a clear talent mismatch between their opposition and them in terms of who's caving them in, and the fact that they don't have a lot of their key guys in right now that can help them overcome it.
And I promise to the listeners it's not going to be a whole negative conversation. But you talked about poor defensive play, and I think Seider's been much better recently than the start of the year. But that third period against the Rangers was probably one of the worst periods, not just for him, but for Chiarot and the rest of the defense as well. It's a little bit of a different Mo Seider that we've seen. I'm observing some kind of frustration. Sometimes looks like he's trying to do too much. Again, it's gotten a lot better recently. But what do you make of Mo Seider's game coming off of his Calder season?
It sometimes feels exactly like what you said. He's trying to do a little too much. And part of me wonders if it has to do with just getting adjusted to how Ben Chiarot plays the game. If you look at Mo Seider's defensive partners from last year, it was largely Danny DeKeyser for most stretches of the season. And Danny DeKeyser was a very safe, stay-at-home defenseman. He was the guy that wasn't going to be jumping in to join the rush. He wasn't going to be flying up the ice trying to get the puck in deep. He wasn't going to be racing behind the net to lead a forecheck. Ben Chiarot, as much as we talk about his physical game, the other element that he plays with is he plays extremely aggressive. You will see him lead the rush. You will see him join the play. You will see him be behind the net, wheeling the puck around the boards in the offensive zone. And I think sometimes Chiarot doesn't pick his spots as well as one would like, and that can leave Mo in a bad situation, and vice versa. If Mo is maybe pinching and Chiarot's not playing safe, that's how they lead to getting to outnumber, or how they end up being outnumbered at the end of the day. And so I think it's getting used to the fact that he's playing with a more aggressive offensive partner than he's maybe used to from last year. And how do they rein each other in? How do they get a feel for, okay, if Chiarot's going, then I need to be stepping back and I can't make the read that I'm seeing here, or does Chiarot need to step back? I think it's going to be feeling each other out. I think that's why you're seeing it maybe get a little bit better over time. And that's something you're going to hope they figure out as they continue to stick together. And that's probably why they've been allowed to stick together. But I think functionally that's the problem is Chiarot's almost a little bit of a riverboat gambler. He's a guy who's going to take chances. And yes, we talk about the physicality, but he takes a lot of chances offensively with the puck. You go back and you watch the tape and you just see it all the time. So I think it's a little bit of both guys getting used to each other, trying not to do too much and being aware of when the other guy is going to make a play offensively such that you step back defensively.
And speaking of defense, again, that second pair, the last couple of games maybe excluded from this, but Hronek has been seeing a lot better results this year, and he's been paired obviously with Olli Maatta all year. How much of that has been Olli Maatta providing some defensive stability and at points offensive flair? And how much of that is Hronek having an improved season over what he's shown over the last couple?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a combination of both. I mean, Olli Maatta, for what it's worth, no one's going to bill him as an extremely offensive-minded defenseman, but he's a guy that can make a good first pass, that can defend well, uses his stick well, maintains his gaps well. It's just where he really struggles is when he has to turn and chase. And he hasn't had to do a lot of that this year. He hasn't been asked to do a lot of that because he's played a very smart game. And I think that's helped Filip Hronek also play a very smart game. I think the two of them in general are not taking a lot of chances that you see Mo Seider and Ben Chiarot take. They're not forcing the offense as much. They're willing to sort of stay within the game. Granted, they are getting easier matchups than Seider and Chiarot. They are also playing in more advantageous offensive situations than Seider and Chiarot. But all that being said, you have to give kudos to a noticeable improvement for both of Mata and Hronek, and what's allowed them to be relatively successful in minimizing the quality chances against. They're just not taking a lot of risky offensive plays right now.
All right, I'm going to bring this to be a little bit more positive now. Again, we're going to do that thing where we pretend the last couple of games haven't happened. Through 12 games, the Red Wings held a, 667 points percentage?
Yep.
And let the listeners know what that statistic was regarding teams through 12 games having that points percentage or better, what their chances were of making the playoffs.
Yeah, so on the Bally Sports pregame show prior to the Rangers game, which we're pretending didn't actually happen, in Murph's 1 minute, he talks about, is it too early to talk playoffs? And if you sort of look at some of the polls around or some of the projections right now from the different outlets, most people still have the Wings somewhere between 15 and 30% likelihood of making the playoffs. An interesting note that I was able to find was if you go back to 2005, 2006, and you look at just at the 12-game mark for all teams, if you look at only the teams that had a 667 points percentage or better, what percentage of those teams actually went on to make the playoffs? And to my surprise, it's actually 78.5% made the playoffs of teams that had a 667 points percentage or better through 12 games. Now, that is by no means perfect. Last year the Flyers went 7-3-2. The Flyers went 7-3-2 to start this year. That's the 667 points percentage. I don't think anybody's expecting the Flyers to be there. In fact, the Flyers last year, I think, finished 20 games below 500. So there's very real opportunity for the wheels to really come off. But that being said, it is sort of an encouraging sign to see that if you're able to get off to that hot start and get those points in the bank, you're setting yourself up for success. And in the age of so many 3-point games that happen in the NHL on a nightly basis, it's hard for teams to catch up to teams in front of them. And so we talked about the Wings have played poorly at 5-on-5. Yes, we talked about how they haven't really deserved the results they've gotten, but that doesn't matter. They got those results. Those points are in the bank. Nobody can take those points away. And so if they can figure out their 5-on-5 game as they get healthy, as Bertuzzi comes back, as Fabry comes back, as Walman comes back, as all of these different guys come back, if they can find their 5-on-5 game and elevate it, they may be able to take advantage of those points that they banked, because it's very hard to play catch-up in today's NHL.
Okay, I want you to be cold, calculating, objective, and brutally honest, Prashanth, based on what I'm going to say. Like, don't hold back. Let me know how stupid or
I've never held back.
No, I know. That's why you send me so many mean texts every day. You start off my morning with a cold splash of water to the face.
Great.
Based on what you said with Red Wings players eventually returning, and you just named a lot of players that aren't even Verona, but that's obviously one that you can't speculate about, so that is what it is. And then also consider, this is still a team that's very much getting used to Derek Lalonde's system overall. If you want a micro view of that, just refer back to what you were just saying about Seider and Chiarot working together. Additionally, maybe Husso regresses a little bit, but maybe Ned gets some better results because the team has played better in front of him moving forward. All of those things added up, the Red Wings can hold on to that wild card or just outside that wild card fight through to, say, the trade deadline. True or false?
I would say false. I had them as an 81-point team coming into the season. I think maybe I would revise that upwards to maybe 86 or 87. But to really be in the wild card picture, you're talking about around 100 points. And so that still puts the Wings several wins short of 100 points. I think the problems at 5-on-5 are still quite large. Like, this is a team that's getting routinely outplayed. We're talking about, their 5-on-5 expected goals for percentage is just north of 44%. Ideally, to be one of the top teams or top 16 teams in the league, you're looking for that to be north of 50%, or at least in that ballpark. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I'm not sure that it's just Tyler Bertuzzi coming back, Jake Walman coming back, Robbie Fabry coming back that fixes it. And truth be told, this is a big, crucial year for the Wings, when it comes to deciding how they're going to play out the next few years. This was sort of the year where you needed to see them take that jump. And I think 86, 87 points is a reasonable jump. I just don't see them being able to hang on to that advantage because for all the things that I just laid out about how they already have those points in the bank, they did also play a relatively weak schedule. And that schedule is only going to intensify. They still have to see Tampa a handful of times. They still have to see Florida a handful of times. We got to see Boston a couple more times. Still got to see Toronto. I mean, these are teams that the Wings really haven't had to deal with yet, aside from the game against Boston. And so that schedule is going to pick up in intensity, and that's where I just don't see them being able to sustain this. But it will be very interesting to see as they start to approach the trade deadline, how that impacts the moves. But my gut is they fall behind pace a little bit.
So a little bit of behind the scenes here. A game that Prashanth likes to play in our group chat is he will say, guess the player who, and then he'll name a stat. So the other day, and it's usually some kind of trick question. Like the answer is, what player currently has 70 goals? You don't even know it. And you look and it's actually Adam Ernie. And somehow Prashanth is the only one who noticed. But yesterday you said which player is leading the Red Wings in expected goals above replacement. And I came close, and I named Pius Suter, who was actually second. But illuminate us on maybe an underappreciated Red Wing right now that has taken too much heat based on his performance.
Yeah, well, too much heat based on his performance at the early part of the season, but it's Lucas Raymond. The process was there, and that's what we're looking at with expected goals above replacement. It's just he wasn't getting the puck into the net. And really, over the last 7 games, we've seen that completely turn around. The guy's on fire. And now he's poised to really be right back on track with where he was last year and to get himself in that range of a 30-goal season. He's finding the soft space. He's making the adjustments that were needed to be made. But it's sort of interesting to see that even despite that slower start, he's come on so quickly because that process is sound and he's made the necessary refinements. Yes, he benefits from getting to play with Dylan Larkin, and that's a lot to do with his ability to find that soft space because Larkin has that gravity about him due to his speed and his ability to play with the puck. But you have to give a lot of props to the way Lucas Raymond has bounced back. He did not allow that slow start to derail him, and he's right back where everyone expected him to be at the beginning of the year.
Last game, we got a little bit of a treat considering, skilled forwards with seeing Jonatan Berggren's first game with the Red Wings, which was a surprise. It was last episode where we said it probably wasn't going to happen, and then Soderblom's day-to-day injury happened, and that made us wrong in record time. But Berggren got on the board with his first NHL point off of Veleno goal, and they obviously had some great chemistry in Grand Rapids. What do you think about Berggren? Can he seize this opportunity with considering the injuries around him, and what did you make of his first game?
I mean, Berggren is a tremendous talent. He's a guy, when you watch him, he has incredible vision, incredible passer of the puck, great touch, great offensive instincts. He often got billed as, potentially being too much of a perimeter player, but I think that was squashed a bit last year in Grand Rapids, as given how quickly and well he adjusted. For me, I think the sky's the limit for Berggren. I think he's the exact kind of offensive mind and creative offensive player the Wings would absolutely benefit from. You put him on a line with a guy who can shoot the puck well, whether it's Lucas Raymond, and you maybe sneak him up on that top line with Larkin and Raymond. That may be a lot of fun. Or after Bertuzzi and maybe Verona comes back, you get him on the line with one of those guys. He's going to find you, and he's going to get you the puck. He's just such an adept passer, and that's where I think he'll be a guy that can do a lot of damage for the Wings moving forward. So it'll be hard to see him lose control of this spot. And even if you go back to that Rangers game, which I know we're pretending didn't actually happen, but unfortunately for everybody else, it did happen. He was probably the best player on the wings that night. When you look at the metrics at the end of the night, him and Joe Veleno, that line did work. And so I would like to see how he handles himself on the road trip. These West Coast road trips are never friendly for the Red Wings. And if he can handle the physicality out west, that LA is going to bring, they're such a physical team and punishing team to play on the forecheck. I think it'll be very, very promising for him to stick if he plays well on this swing.
Staying on the vein of young players, I'm not just thinking about Berggren, but I'm also thinking about, Elmer Soderblom had a hot start to the season. It was very exciting, but has obviously struggled a little bit since then, some games more than others. And then I'm also thinking of players on the fringe on the other side of that line, say Simon Edvinsson down in Grand Rapids. There's an interesting balance that the Red Wings have to do, where in previous years you would have said, no, keep them away from this hellscape that is the NHL version of this team in the Red Wings and stick them in Grand Rapids to develop. But it's a better team now. Third period collapses notwithstanding, they might be able to do more with that NHL spot. So considering Soderblom's performance and considering, if Edvinsson goes strong in Grand Rapids, what do you make of that balancing act? And are there any moves that you would like to see made?
Yeah, I think Soderblom, for the start he got off to, obviously scoring in the home opener, that was really exciting. And he's definitely got great hands for someone of his size. I think what you've seen over the last few games prior to him missing this past one against the Rangers is he is still struggling a bit with the pace of the game, making the reads quick enough, making the accurate reads, making accurate plays off of that. I think the speed of the game is still catching up to him. He is someone who did transition directly from the SHL and the bigger ice over to the NHL. And I know that's always a question mark for folks in terms of, with the smaller ice, are players able to make decisions better on the perimeter? And so he's a guy that I do think would benefit from a little bit of time in Grand Rapids. You maybe flip-flop him and Berggren, given that Berggren's already seen a full year in the AHL and is off to a great start this year. He might be able to be a little bit more successful than Soderblom was at the start, even though Soderblom does offer a skill set at his size that nobody else is going to be able to provide. It's just, I think he's got to figure out how to play the pace of the game that on that smaller ice. As far as Simon Edvinsson, Edvinsson's been fine down in Grand Rapids. He's played reasonably well. I don't think he's been a world beater by any means. He's been comfortably good. I think he's still, again, finding his game down there. The Griffins as a whole are still finding their game. They haven't necessarily looked super impressive to date. I personally would let him see a little bit more time down in Grand Rapids before bringing him up. I don't think there's any reason to rush him. I don't know that you're going to get what you want, given that if we go back to training camp and we go back to the preseason, sort of the biggest knock on Edvinsson was he was still struggling to make the right reads. He would get, he had a lot of unforced turnovers, a lot of bad passes, maybe on the outlet. So I don't necessarily want to have him get his confidence derailed. Again, when you have so many guys out of the lineup already for the Wings, I don't know that he's someone that's going to elevate you to the point where it's worth risking that. I say let him get a little bit more time down in Grand Rapids. And potentially if you end up making a trade, December, January, February time, and you end up shipping out, one of your left defensemen, then maybe that's when you bring him up and let him get an extended run towards the end of the year after he's built up a little bit of confidence.
Okay, the topic that is uncomfortable for Red Wings fans, but it's mid-November now, so Dylan Larkin, the Red Wings captain, pending UFA, still without a contract, still negotiating with the team. The Matt Barzal number, which is, over 9, is looming large, and then you consider the cap math and what the Red Wings can offer with that eighth year. You might be looking at a number closer to the $8 million mark if you're Yzerman and company. Where do you see Larkin landing here, and what do you make of that? Maybe a disparity of $1 million or more, and that's just pure conjecture.
Yeah, I'm not personally worried about it. The interesting thing here is is it seems like the cap is going to jump, and it's going to jump sooner than maybe most were anticipating. And it has to do with the players paying back the debts that they owe from, the COVID seasons. But I think that's part of the reason why the negotiation is taking a little bit longer, is maybe you're feeling out what the cap structure is going to look like, getting a better idea of what that sharp increase could look like. And then from there, being able to figure out what your structure is going to go, or what structure is going to potentially look. So, for example, the most recent numbers I think we've been given is next year the salary cap goes up $1 million, up to $83.5 million. And then potentially as early as 2024, we're looking at a $4 to $5 million increase. And then 25-26, we're looking at another $5 million increase. So, for example, we always think about this in terms of cap hit percentage. What is a 10% cap hit this year, which would be $8.2 million? That's now $9.2 million in 2025, 2026 if the cap rises the way as intended. And so I do think you're going to end up with Larkin maybe closer to $9 million because of this. I don't know if he gets the full Barzal number or if he even ends up a little bit higher than that. But I'd guess roughly somewhere between 8.7 and 9 is where he lands. The deal is going to get done. He's not leaving. Don't be worried about that. I think importantly, the Wings are just going to let this sort of play out and get the most accurate picture they can. And we know Steve Yzerman's not afraid to let his guys get to free agency. He did this with Steven Stamkos, brought him back, got the clear picture. Same thing I think will happen with Larkin.
Now, Tyler Bertuzzi, same confidence?
No, not the same confidence. And I think it has a lot to do with where's this team going to go? If for example, let's say the Wings overperform. Let's say my guess is completely wrong. The Wings go out, they're in the wild card picture, they stick, and they maybe narrowly miss the playoffs or even just barely sneak in. Now you're sort of in the sense that, okay, the moves I made last year work, and now is the time to push forward. So in that scenario, I actually do think Tyler Bertuzzi is potentially a part of the team moving forward. I think at that point you're saying, okay, I need to load up. Let me lock and load with Bertuzzi here. Potentially throw him a 5-year deal if he's willing to take it, 5 or 6. Potentially bring him in a little under Larkin's number. And you roll with that because now you've committed, you're scaling up, you're ready to go. In the flip side situation, let's say you fall out of the playoff picture by January and you're probably going to finish the year 85, 86, 87 points, somewhere in that range. Now you have a decision to make. This is your opportunity with both Larkin and Bertuzzi not having contracts to, do you need to retry this rebuild and scale back down and sell off at the trade deadline in order to add more first-round picks, knowing what the 2023 draft looks like? Obviously, it's a little too late to be accumulating 2023 picks because everybody knows what this 2023 draft looks like now. But it's going to be a ridiculous draft in the entire first round. And so if you are able to get those picks in there, I think that's going to be critical. And that's an avenue that you think about if you're out of the playoff picture in January, because at that point, you're not going to be able to add enough to move the needle out of getting stuck in the 10th to 14th range, which is the worst possible spot to be, where you're not drafting from the elite talent and you're more than a couple pieces away.
All right. Well, I think that's about as much hockey content as I'll want to cover with the Red Wings playing against the LA Kings in about 9 hours. So certainly they're going to give us a bunch of storylines that are going to make this entire conversation moot. But just to wrap up, Wings money on the board, that's something that we started together. Last year we raised $32,000. The listeners will know all about this, but this year our goal is $50,000. And why don't we give a little bit of a refresher to folks who might not know what Wings money on the board is and how to participate?
Yeah, so Wings money on the board is very straightforward. You sort of take the team at large and you say, all right, based on this statistic or this event happening, I will pledge a certain amount of money that I will donate at the end of the year. So an example would be, okay, I will pledge $1 for every Lucas Raymond goal that he scores in this season. And at the end of the year, we'll reach out to you after you've submitted your pledge on our pledge form. If you haven't seen the pledge form, you can find that Google form on the Wing Wheel Podcast website. But we'll reach out to you. You make your donation, and you'll get entered into winning, a whole bunch of different prizes and stuff that we'll have available at the end of the year. All of this money is going towards the Jamie Daniels Foundation, to again raise awareness for substance use disorder. And so really the pledge can be as creative as you want. So I've had people pledge $5 for every Giovanni Smith fight, 25 cents for every time, let's say, let's throw it back. Let's say Dominic Hasek was still on the team. I'll give you $20 every time Hasek headbutts a puck, like stuff like that. Get as creative as you want. You can make your own pledge. You can pick one of the pre-slotted pledges we have. Anyways, it's all about having fun and raising money for a good cause.
All right, Prashanth, thanks so much for joining us on the show. Until next time, folks, you know how to find Prashanth Iyer. He's on Twitter, Iyer_Prashanth. And be sure to check out Wings Money on the Board as well, wingedwheelpodcast.com/wings, MOTB. Prashanth, thanks again, man. Say hi to the little one and to Steph, and until next time.
Always. Appreciate it.
Okay, that was our interview with Prashanth Iyer. As always, thank you to Prashanth for not just bringing us his expertise in terms of analytics and, again, his brutal honesty about the team, good or bad, but also partnering with us for Wings Money on the Board. So again, that's wingedwheelpodcast.com/wings, MOTB. Hope to see all your pledges soon. Last episode, we took an overtime question asking about what Red Wings would be what position if they were an NFL team. And all of us completely, like absolute dummies, whiffed on remembering that Andrew Kopp, played quarterback in high school. I was editing and something came through from that segment and I heard it, and I heard me and Brad, the two biggest meatheads here, just immediately say Larkin, and I just face immediately into my palm. So we missed the gimmies here. Something else I want to talk about before we get into some NHL news. We mentioned it earlier while covering the games, but Mo Seider, it seems to be, I don't want to call it feast or famine, but I do think he's been better of late. These last two games not counting. I do think we've seen more Seider from last year. But again, these last two games there have been a lot of moments where it's not just like a whole period of play, but I can think of a goal that LA had, which started really by Seider not clearing the puck and just overthinking it and trying an outlet pass, and it should have just gone out of the zone on the penalty kill. Yeah, Ned let in a puck that I don't think really should have gone in, but still, if you have a goalie there who's not really playing his best that game, that's the kind of simple thing. And it's not like I'm needling the guy for that one play, but it's just a microcosm of, it's the easiest advice to give in hockey, especially to a defenseman. As you'll know, Evan, you were a former defenseman. When nothing is going right, you just need to strip it back to the fundamentals. Like, just make the basic right play. And who on the Red Wings is better than that Seider? Nobody.
You have to do the old 2016 Red Wings where you just chip it off the glass and glassing out. You
can see the frustration on him. And, sometimes it's as loud as he two hands a stick off the boards when he's pissed off about a goal that went in. And sometimes it's just like, he's trying to do 10 different things at once with the puck. I've seen a lot of people attribute it to Ben Chiarot. Prashanth talked a lot about the way Ben Chiarot's game and how that affects Seider's style. And it's a funny thing to say, well, was Danny DeKeyser or Jordan Osterley better than Ben Chiarot? No, I don't think they were better players. But yeah, maybe stylistically they don't mesh with him as naturally. But at the same time, I think what the coaching staff and, Nick Lidstrom and anyone who's working with Seider really have to dial in on, and I'm sure they already are, is that adaptability. We talked about Lucas Raymond and how he's adapted his game to get back to finding space because that's where he's the most dangerous. For Mo Seider, he has to find that adaptability to be able to play with different D partners. I said this on a previous podcast, but he is going to be the better of the two defensemen on his pairing, probably his whole career, if not most of it.
Wouldn't that be a nice problem to have if he wasn't?
That'd be fantastic. Edvinsson, if he comes up and he's lights out, then yeah, that's a great problem to have. But Seider's probably going to have a lot of different D partners, and he's going to need to be able to adapt. That's what every great defenseman does. And I don't think he's not an adaptable player, but through these first 15 odd games through the season, you can see him. Things aren't adding up to the plays that he wants to happen. And the pressure is there, I'm sure, for him to carry this defense. This is a better defensive core, but it's still not a good one. But he really, for this team to succeed, it can't just be the goalies, like you said, having the best game, being the best player on the ice. Seider has to really be leading the defense that night too, in my mind.
Yeah, and you know what? He's still very young, and defense at the NHL level is the most exposing thing you could possibly do, because every mistake is witnessed by everyone, and you just wish you could pull the trap door sometimes. And he doesn't have the foot speed that like an Adam Fox or a Cale Makar or Miro Heiskanen have to really, skate his way out of his problems. Like, Moritz Seider is a good skater, but he's not those guys. He's not in that tier of god level skating ability.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to do it with the tools he has, and I think he just really has to get back to that. Teams are targeting in on him a lot more. They're making his life a lot more difficult than it was last year, even though he does have a more capable defensive partner in Ben Chiarot. It's going to take some time, and just because last year was absolutely incredible doesn't, and now that things are going less than ideal this year, doesn't mean he's going to land somewhere in the middle. I think there's still a lot more to Moritz Seider. It's just every defenseman at the NHL has to find their way somehow with the tools they have, and I 100% believe that he will do that. It's just going to take some time.
So for this road trip coming up, again, the Red Wings have Anaheim before we talk on next podcast, which will be Wednesday night. After that, they have San Jose, so those are both late-night games, and they're back on the East Coast for another road game against Columbus on Saturday. These 3 losses in a row now, Montreal in the shootout, New York atrociously in the third period, and LA when they couldn't really rally with enough time. Those are tough losses, some more than others. I still think that there's what we've been saying holds true, that this team, it's not a lot to panic about, and this is a lot more in line, and Prashanth said a lot of this. This is a lot more in line with where they are on paper. But this team can use this road trip for the reasons you stated, Evan. It's a little bit of a soft schedule, or there's an opportunity to take advantage of points, even if you're on the road, against teams that will give you more space than maybe the Boston Bruins will, or whatever the team is unreal right now. So Seider is going to be at the forefront of that. Obviously, Husso and Ned is going to pretty much dictate the most likely outcome of that game, but Seider has time, and this is what sophomore seasons are like, especially for star rookies.
Everybody's got game tape on you now. Nobody at the NHL level is pulling up his Swedish game tape to watch what he does. They just say, there you got this rookie kid. He's huge. He plays a tough-nosed game. You got to be ready for him. Now they've got infinity amount of tape on Moritz Seider, and they know how to exploit some of the weaknesses he has in his game. So he's got the talent, all the talent in the world to get through this. People need to pump the brakes a little bit. And this is a California road trip. They're tough, and it's a good time for the team to do a California road trip. It's still early in the season. You get to know the new guys a little bit better on a personal level. I think they'll be okay.
All right, why don't we jump into overtime here and start wrapping this episode up. Overtime on this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. If you want to join the Dub Club, some benefits: you join the Patreon exclusive Discord, which is a lot of fun. The Winged Wheel Podcast Discord, a blast. We just added a World Cup channel by request, actually. So hockey talk, game day talk, prospects, analytics, World Cup, other sports. There's a Formula One channel because there's a lot of crossover between hockey and F1 fans. Great community and a lot of fun to be in. Of course, you also get automatically entered into every single giveaway we have, whether it's Patreon exclusive or public. And we have 2 tickets to every Red Wings home game this season that we are, the majority of them are going straight to Patreon supporters. So we run giveaways for those home games. And if you're a Patreon supporter, you can win 2 seats to a Red Wings game. They're really great seats too. And it gives us money to buy duct tape and socks to stuff in Brad's mouth, so we can keep him quiet, and he's in my basement this episode.
That's right.
Yeah. In all seriousness, though, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast, and we can't say thank you enough for supporting the show. Why don't we start with... I don't even know if this is a great question or if it's going to be an easy one for you, Evan, but I think it's funny. From Jack Mullen, he says, would you rather, for Evan, change your own car's oil or pay someone else $500 to do it?
I would change my own oil.
I'm glad. You're crazy, but you're not insane.
I already want to change my own tires because I hate spending $50 each time to change your tires over to winters to summers, summers to winters. Like, it's just just buy the stuff and it pays for itself. Especially when you have two cars. Like, my God.
Yeah, it adds up. Bill Nye the Thigh Guy says, "Hey Dub boys, even though some games don't go our way like tonight, it's still good hockey. Out of everything this season, the compete level is so much higher, and you can see Yzerman's vision for the team. Question: which player outside the Wings has been the biggest surprise?" I mean, you noted it here, but I think it has to be Erik Karlsson in the start he's off to with the San Jose Sharks.
We're talking about NHL wide?
Yeah, yeah.
We have Erik Karlsson? How the hell did I miss that?
How long did I sleep in?
I'll say Bo Horvat.
Okay.
He's one of the league leaders in goals right now on a crummy Canucks team.
Yeah.
So that might be a little bit of a niche answer, but I've been quite surprised by his goal scoring ability thus far into the season.
For me, Gabe Vilardi's another name.
Yes.
Like, I remember I really wanted the Red Wings to draft him back in his draft. And I know he had his back injury and he was out for a while, and there's some question marks for LA as to how he'd turn out for them. But he's been fantastic. 10 goals so far in the season. And, man, that team is looking better and better every day.
And Quentin Byfield's he's either injured or in the American League right now. I cannot recall, but he's not with LA, so they still have a loaded pipeline. And Alex Turcotte.
Yeah.
So my God, must be nice.
And you know what? The next question here from Jeremy Dahl is basically asking us to give some love to Jack Eichel, and that really would have been a great answer to the previous question, because I don't want to say I expected it or I called it, but when I predicted Vegas to have a much better season, that was on the back of getting the old Jack Eichel back, and man, he does look like he's back.
I'm still loving the drama between him and Buffalo.
I loved that so much. Just the peacocking for the Hattie. Oh God, that was so good.
It's nice when you have no vested interest in it, or you're not an affected party by it at all. And it's just great to see. We need way more heels in the NHL, and I absolutely love it. It's amazing.
That was my exact thought. I'm like, I can see why a certain Buffalo fan would be pissed, especially, with how that whole saga went down. But for hockey, just such good entertainment.
I saw someone had a sign at that game that said, "Thanks for nothing."
I love it from the player and I love it from the fans. Yeah. Nobody's wrong. Like, that's entertainment. That's so
you paid
good.
your money. You can make your sign and voice your displeasure with the former captain of your team. I love it.
Go for it. Jonathan Melwish says, "I've tried to be level-headed about the team's performances since I got back into the Wings, thanks to your podcast. But is it wrong to start getting pissed about performances like the third period against the Rangers? Shouldn't results like the Rangers one now be unacceptable? Is there anything that needs to be addressed, i.e. pairing changes?" I think you're spot on. I think it's important to be level-headed in that you don't say, nuke the team and fire so-and-so and whatever.
That's what Twitter's for.
Yeah. Well, or whatever social media site now.
Yeah.
But you don't, those big grand statements and screaming that the sky is falling, I don't think that is necessarily warranted. But I think it's really, really fair, and you touched on this, Evan, by saying there's a sprinkle of expectations on this team now. It's really fair to have those expectations and to, as a fan, be pissed off when they don't come through. Like, Yzerman took a clear direction with this team by saying, we are not going to have another bad year. I don't care how good Bedard is. We are spending to improve the team around Raymond and Seider and Larkin and Bertuzzi and everyone else. I want this team to be more competitive. They can lose games. They could lose those 3 games in a row, but the 8-2 loss can't happen. Like that, it needs to stop. I
long for the day where the Red Wings just lose a 3-2 game and you're like, you know what? That could have went either way.
I essentially preemptively mute Prashanth at this point when they're getting bombed like 8 or 9-1 or whatever it is, because there's always a stat of like, in the last 30 years, there have only been this many 8 or 9 goal losses, and it's like...
And the Red Wings have 50% of them over the past 2 years.
Yeah, and that's on a good good stat. Most of the time, it's most of them. So yeah, nobody can tell Red Wings fans that they're not allowed to be pissed at this. We would never say, oh yeah, this team is one of the worst in the league. Even if they were one of the worst in the league, Brad says this all the time. You are not so bad where you're losing 8-2 on a 600 unanswered goal third period. Like, no team in the NHL is that bad, even if they're trying to tank for Connor Bedard.
Maybe 20 years ago, those losses could be explainable, but in a league where the top of the top and the bottom of the bottom are so minutely close to one another, you can't be having those types of losses.
And then last question here from Jonathan Pennick says, gents, the fact that we're still having blowout losses is concerning. Are there concerns with leadership on this team? I can't help but think that when this team starts to spiral downward during a game, that there isn't a strong enough voice in the room to pull them back up. Or is this just still a team in transition and we need to wait for the chemistry to build? It's a complicated answer. First of all, unless you're in that room, you don't know what the leadership voices are. Yeah, Larkin has a C on his jersey and he has a certain amount of responsibility. Yeah, they brought in guys like Perron and Chiarot to help guide through times like this. So you can't say they're doing a good enough job or a bad enough job. Is this going to be something that gets better in time? It should. Winning culture and winning attitudes and getting in the right mental headspace as a team does not happen overnight. And we talked extensively in the preseason. Like, this team is going to take some time to settle into their form, and that's not just an on-ice production. It's the mentality they carry together. Pick your favorite old hockey commentator, the intangibles.
Yep.
But that can't be a de facto shield for this team forever. At some point, these losses do have to stop, like we just said. So, again, I stop short of saying leadership needs to change or someone is not pulling their weight here. You can point to hockey plays that are happening on the ice that need to change. It's multifaceted, and it's not so simple as Larkin needs to be more inspirational in the room.
And when people think of leadership on teams, how many teams in the Red Wings position can you definitively say have these guys run the locker room? They've established this culture, and they're the ones leading this team to the next stage, whatever that might be. Like, I can't really think of any. When I think of teams that have great culture and great leadership, I think of Boston. I think of Tampa. I think of Colorado. None of those teams are bad teams. The only good team that I wonder about their leadership, knock this one off your bingo card, is Toronto. Toronto, I'm not entirely sure what the hell goes on in that locker room because I don't see a lot of fight from their top players. But, we've probably beat that one to death. But there's...
In the distance, the Steve Dangle podcast sprinting towards us.
Yeah. Might take a few hours because of all the snow on the highway. But
yeah.
I can't think of a lot of teams in the Red Wings stage. Maybe the closest team there would be, let's say, Ottawa, maybe Buffalo. Like, I can't really definitively say the leadership in those locker rooms are all that different than what I've seen out of Detroit. And like you said, like, we're not in the locker room, we're not behind those closed doors really hearing it. We see the product of that on the ice and in interviews and other YouTube videos and stuff like that. So I don't think the Red Wings really have a problem with that. It's something that is nurtured as the team gets better, and it becomes second nature to a winning team.
The test for me for Derek Lalonde and his staff this year isn't to make the playoffs. And we talked with Prashanth. It's still not likely. And I stand by that. The test I will hold to this coaching staff and this leadership group this year is this team minimizing the amount of absolutely monumental collapses? They're allowed to have bad games. They're allowed to have off nights. Good players are allowed to make bad mistakes. That's just hockey. But I want Red Wings fans to be able to watch a game, and if they lose in terrible fashion with some like meltdown or third period implosion or whatever it might be, I want them to say, damn, that sucked, and that hasn't happened in months. Like
we were due for one of those.
Yeah, it's just all too common right now. So by the end of the season and into next season, that's kind of where I'm holding that measuring stick against Lalonde. So we'll see how the season goes. It's important to remember it's still only 15 games. So it just is what it is right now.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up and we're going to start recording our Patreon exclusive overtime. So we would like to thank all of you for listening. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're a new listener, welcome to the show. There usually is one more voice on here, and we really appreciate you listening to the Winged Wheel podcast. Tell a friend. That's a great way to support the show. We've had some people tell us, I can't do Patreon. We never begrudge anyone for that. That is just a bonus for us. We so appreciate for those who are able. But if you're not, tell a friend about the show. Leave a rating for us on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your show. Wherever you get your podcast. It's a big help. We would like to thank all of our Patreon supporters, especially our name level sponsors on Patreon. Arjun Shanker, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Akefer, Armchair GM / Genius, Nick Perks, Terry, driver of the number 69 Crying Ryan Hannah's Banana Slam at Jamathon, Matthew M. Rice, Croner's Left Knee, Actual Elon Musk, Brandon M., Carl Brutanen Nanalewski, Chimmy, Chris Ball, Chris P., Citizen High Five, Connor Scovey, Coyote Season Tickets in Tempe, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Give Blood, Fight Probert, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Joseph Barry, who I believe is a newer name-level sponsor, Kaylin Wood, Kevin James, King Tone, Marcus, Matt McKay, Nedeljkovic, goalie number 1, Nicholas Fritz, R.A., Ryan Hanna the Unshowered, Ryan Hanna's Big Banana, damn you, Arjun, Ryan Hubbard, Scott Martin, The Podcasting Couch, Zachary Rogers, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, number 1 Detroit Red Guys fan, Adam, I wish I could finish like Ernie, Antonio Gracias, Babe Landeskog, Ben Barron, Brad Simmons, Brian Vasha, Connor Leightonen, Darren Fick, Dave W., Philip Zadiz Nuts, Hi, I'll have an order of large fries and a pizza with 2 eyes, also maybe a win, Heronix Handlebar, James Laporte, Jeremiah Dobo, JM Rhapsody, John Evans, John Engels, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Linda Hull, Logan Burgos, Matt Keeler, Matt S., Loyal Soldier of the Cheesebag Army, Maximilian, Melissa Erickson, M. Cucci, Ophelia, Papa Woody, Puce on the Loose, Thick Rick, and Aaron Hudson. Thank you all so much. Evan, dinner time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.